Rain lashed against the library windows, the sound a constant, moody drumbeat. It was the perfect atmosphere for research, which is why I found myself hunched over a dusty tome in the forgotten corners of the Nevada Historical Society. The library itself was a relic, a sprawling maze of towering bookshelves crammed with leather-bound volumes. This particular section, dedicated to local folklore, was especially eerie. The air hung heavy, and the only light filtering through the grime-coated windows cast long, skeletal shadows. As I searched through a book about a series of unexplained disappearances centuries ago, a shiver ran down my spine. Whether it was the chill from the drafty room or the unsettling content of the book, I couldn't say. Just then, a low murmur drifted through the stacks. It sounded like hushed whispers, almost inaudible but distinct, coming from somewhere deep within the labyrinth of bookshelves. My curiosity piqued. I crept forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The whispers grew louder, the voices indistinguishable but laced with a strange urgency. Reaching a particularly wide section of shelves, I strained to hear their source. It seemed to be coming from behind a towering wall of ancient books. Hesitantly, I reached out and brushed a hand against the cool leather spines. A sudden cold swept over me, and the whispers intensified, turning into frantic pleas. Panic seized me. Was someone trapped there? But how could that be? I scanned the area, seeing no signs of struggle or movement. Yet, the whispers were undeniable, growing more desperate with each passing moment. My heart pounded in my chest, and I contemplated fleeing this unsettling place. Just then, a book from the towering stack closest to me toppled over, crashing onto the floor with a loud thud. The whispers abruptly stopped. I held my breath, listening for any sound. Silence. Had I imagined everything? With trembling hands, I began to pull books out of the stack, creating a pathway to see behind it. Reaching the back, I peeked through a small gap. There was nothing there, just a solid brick wall, covered in dust and cobwebs. I stood there utterly bewildered. How could the whispers have originated from a solid wall? The book I dropped lay open at my feet. Glancing down, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't the book on local folklore. This one was ancient, its pages filled with strange symbols and a single inscription scrawled across the first page in faded ink. The voices of the lost, forever trapped. Suddenly, the air grew frigid, and I felt a presence behind me. A gust of icy wind extinguished the single dim light bulb illuminating the section. I lunged for the exit, stumbling in the darkness. As I burst out of the stacks and into the main library hall, I didn't dare look back. But the echo of the whispers lingered in my mind, a chilling reminder of the secrets buried deep within the Nevada Historical Society. I rarely needed the library anymore. With the internet on my phone, information was readily available at my fingertips. But when my grandmother mentioned a specific recipe from an old cookbook, I knew only a trip to the Iqbal Library could unearth it. The Iqbal Library was a childhood haven for me. Its towering shelves housed endless adventures, waiting to be discovered. Now, years later, it felt smaller, imbued with a faint musty smell that brought back a wave of nostalgia. The cookbook section, however, was different. The once bright and cheerful space seemed strangely gloomy. The shelves were sparsely populated, rows upon rows empty, with just a few scattered volumes left untouched. The specific cookbook I needed, Grandma's Delights, was missing. Disappointed, I was about to leave when an elderly librarian with kind eyes approached me. "Looking for something, dear?" she inquired. I explained my search, and a flicker of surprise crossed her face. "Oh, Grandma's Delights," she mused, her voice a low whisper. "That one rarely sees the light of day. But perhaps..." She trailed off, her gaze wandering back to the empty shelves. A moment later, a smile lit up her face. "Follow me, child," she said, leading me towards a restricted section behind a heavy curtain. The air there grew colder, making me shiver despite the warmth of the afternoon sun outside. The librarian pulled out a single book from a high shelf. It was Grandma's Delights, bound in worn leather and exuding an unsettling aura. "Be very careful with this one," the librarian warned, her voice tinged with concern. "Things have a habit of clinging to those who borrow it," she finished, her gaze meeting mine with a sudden intensity. A shiver ran down my spine, and I felt a strange coldness emanating from the book itself. "What do you mean?" I asked hesitantly, my initial excitement replaced by a creeping unease. The librarian hesitated, her lips pursed in a thoughtful frown. "There have been rumors," she finally admitted, "of strange occurrences after borrowing that particular book. Ingredients disappearing mysteriously, recipes changing on their own. Some say it even whispers secrets in the dead of night." My mind raced. Had my grandmother experienced any of these things? But then I dismissed the thought. Grandma was old-fashioned, yes, but not superstitious. This was probably just a local legend, a spooky tale spun to keep curious hands at bay. Thankful for the warning, I decided to take a chance. Grandma's recipe was too important to pass up. Taking the book, I promised to handle it with care and return it promptly. The librarian nodded curtly, a hint of worry lingering in her eyes. As I walked home, the book felt heavier than expected, a strange weight that seemed to press down on me. Reaching my apartment, I placed it cautiously on the kitchen counter, its worn leather cover seeming to absorb the sunlight filtering through the window. Later that night, as I prepared to sleep, a faint rustling sound from the kitchen startled me. Creeping towards the source, I found the book open on the counter, a single page fluttering in the breeze from the open window. On the page, a recipe I hadn't seen before was meticulously written in a spidery hand. The title, scrawled in blood-red ink, chilled me to the bone. Soul stew. The ingredients listed were a grotesque mix of things I couldn't even bring myself to imagine. Panic seized me. The librarian's warnings echoed in my head. The book was feeding on me, tempting me with its dark secrets. With a shaking hand, I slammed it shut. The next few days were a blur. Everything I tried to cook went wrong. Fresh vegetables would turn rotten within hours, milk would curdle instantly, and even simple tasks like boiling water ended in disaster. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by an ever-present fear of what the book might do next. Desperate, I rushed back to the library. The librarian, looking older and haggard, greeted me with a sigh of relief. "Thank goodness you're back," she exclaimed, snatching the book from my trembling hands. "What's happening?" I stammered. "How do I stop it?" She explained that the book was a relic, a conduit for a mischievous spirit that thrived on chaos and discord. Borrowing it meant inviting that chaos into your life, and the only way to break free was to return it willingly. As the librarian carefully replaced the book on the restricted shelf, a sense of relief washed over me. The unsettling darkness that had shrouded my apartment seemed to lift. The experience left a lasting mark on me. I may not have gotten the recipe I was looking for, but I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the most interesting things in libraries are best left undisturbed. The flickering fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow over the endless rows of books in the Central City Library. It was past midnight, and I, a lowly night janitor, was the only soul present in the vast building. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic squeak of my mop against the polished floor. Tonight, however, the usual stillness felt different, charged with an unseen tension. Every creak and groan of the aging building seemed amplified, sending shivers down my spine. As I rounded a corner, a book tumbled off a shelf, landing with a loud thud that echoed through the emptiness. My heart hammered in my chest. I wasn't known for being superstitious, but the late-night shift in the library always played tricks on my mind. I picked up the book, a dusty tome with a faded inscription on the cover, "Forgotten Tales." Curiosity piqued. I cracked it open. The pages were brittle and yellowed, filled with strange symbols and archaic script. As I skimmed the text, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The story spoke of ancient rituals, dark magic, and creatures lurking in the shadows. A sudden gust of icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing a nearby light fixture. The book slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Terror surged through me. There was no logical explanation for the sudden drop in temperature or the extinguished light. Panic clawing at my throat, I scrambled to get a grip on myself. It was just an old book, just my imagination running wild. But then I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the stacks behind me. Holding my breath, I strained to listen. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. Slowly, I backed away, my eyes scanning the darkness between the towering shelves. The growl intensified, closer now, undeniable. I knew I had to get out of there. Turning on my heel, I bolted towards the exit, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The scratching sound followed me, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. I could practically feel a cold breath on my neck, urging me to run faster. Reaching the front door, I fumbled with the lock, the knob cold and slick with sweat. Just as I managed to yank it open, a monstrous hand clamped down on my shoulder. A scream tore from my throat as I was yanked back into the darkness of the library. The following morning, the library staff discovered the door ajar and my mop abandoned near the entrance. A single book lay open on the floor by the checkout desk, Forgotten Tales. There were no signs of a struggle, no trace of me ever being there. The library remained open, the staff unaware of the chilling secret it held within its walls. But late at night, when the shadows lengthen and the silence grows heavy, some say they can hear a faint scratching sound, followed by a low, guttural growl, echoing through the stacks, a constant reminder of the night the janitor vanished, leaving only a book filled with forgotten tales.